You know, I've had some words with my father, who is Satan, obviously, and he tells me that his little minions are not going out to see the first Omen. What's up with that, you guys? Is this true? Are the rumors true? Tell me now. If so, that is simply unacceptable. For my returning cult members, my setup probably looks really different. That's because I'm in the UK right now. I'm visiting some friends. For any newbies out here, yes, I am the daughter of Satan. Yes, my YouTube channel is where I run my online virtual cult. You can join us. All you have to do is click subscribe. Also helps to click the like button and the notification bell so you never miss our next cult meeting. And it's true! It's true. The first Omen is not doing very well in theaters, which prompted me to make this review. Originally, I wasn't going to be making this review because I feel like I might feel similarly to how many of you must feel right now. Before I went to go see the first Omen, I was like, I'm only going to see this because this is my job. I used to not really be a fan of the original Omen because I just didn't really get 70s horror for the longest time. Yes, it was a character flaw. Yes, I have had a character arc. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I was going into it thinking, okay, like, you know, I don't even like religious horror, whatever. But I'll talk about it in my April recap. It's fine. I'll watch it so other people don't have to. So imagine my shock when I'm seeing nothing but positive reviews the week before the movie comes out. All these critics are drumming up so much hype, and I'm like, I don't know, that could have been me. I was invited to go to the world premiere in LA, but I couldn't make it because I had another event that night. But I get a little swept up by premieres and that whole atmosphere. It always makes movies seem better than they are. So I'm always skeptical when everyone's like raving about a movie. Though the fact that I saw 0 negative reviews really before going into it, I did let myself get a little bit hyped up. I was like, okay, this is gonna be a good time. And it was. I thought that people were exaggerating, as they often do on the internet, because things often operate in a binary. Usually people either feel like a movie is good or bad. I tend to operate in the middle ground, like, ooh, this movie is good, but I didn't like it. Or this movie is bad, but I was very entertained. This movie was good, and I loved it. But it's only made $18 million so far on a $30 million budget. This video is going up in another few days from when I'm shooting this, and by then another weekend will have passed. So I'm hoping that it catches up a little bit, but it's up against a lot. I feel like this was the best time for the movie to release because it is around Easter time. It's a very Catholic time of year, you know? But they were a little bit late for that, and I imagine that they thought about— oh, Milo. It is up against a lot right now, namely Godzilla x Kong, which I saw that and I love that and I can kind of understand. It's also up against Dev Patel's Monkey Man, and that movie also ripped. There are so many good movies in theaters right now, and it's kind of easy to see why the first Omen might be overlooked, especially because in a world where the people are tired of the remakes and the franchises and all that, it is a prequel to a movie from 1976. So it seems like it might be antithetical to a lot of our desires of wanting more original horror. But when I tell you that it is just that, although there are a lot of comparisons to be made to Immaculate, we'll get into that a little bit later, because I just don't want to get into Immaculate spoilers in a review for an entirely different movie until later. I can see why this movie is kind of being overlooked. They're also not going as all out with the marketing as they are with something like Immaculate. For Immaculate, Sydney Sweeney watched the movie with 2 nuns, and we got a little bit of their commentary. Jesus Christ. They also made the tickets $6.66 like a couple Wednesdays ago. They had these little clips of Sydney Sweeney reading out of the Bible.
From there, Elijah went up to Bethel. As he was walking along the road, some boys came out of town and jeered at him. "Get out of here, Baldy," they said. "Get out of here, Baldy." He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys.
They used one of the most negative reviews that they found. Maybe it wasn't even a review, maybe it was just something that somebody wrote on Twitter, but just, you know, about how the movie was so blasphemous and vile and whatever. And to most people that aren't religious fanatics, that's like a glowing recommendation. That is great marketing. I really have not seen anything like that for the first Omen besides word of mouth, and I do think that they were right to maybe allocate more of the budget towards making this a beautiful, beautiful period piece, rather than sending that into the marketing, because, you know, if you make a good movie, word of mouth is gonna be good and it's gonna do well. But I think that only would have worked if Monkey Man and Godzilla x Kong weren't also dominating at the box office right now, because those are also both excellent movies for very, very different reasons, but you know what I'm saying. Otherwise, I feel like this could have been this year's Talk to Me, not in that it's like an indie original, but it feels that way. I know that it's a prequel, but you know what? For that very reason, because it is not a sequel, because it is a prequel, it still is, and it's an origin story, you know, it still feels so original. They actually tried with this one. This, I can promise you, if you've had your reservations because you're like, well, I don't want to go see yet another franchise movie that they spit out about 50 years later, like I'm just trying to see new stuff finally, I can promise you that what this team brought, it is fresh, it is original. It's also directed by Arkasha Stevenson, and I will literally watch anything that she ever does until the end of time. It seems like she's directed a good amount of TV and 2 features and 2 short films. She is relatively very new on the scene, so maybe they didn't expect that she was gonna come out with a bang like this, but she really did. Also, with the cast that's involved, I know that sometimes, like with a big Netflix movie, they aren't actually trying to make movies, they're trying to make giant $200 million advertisements so that you will subscribe to Netflix. For example, the Eli Roth directed film Borderlands. It's got this really stacked cast, but it looks like it's probably going to be the worst movie that any of us have ever seen. I know that there are instances when a lot of high-profile actors will just do a paycheck gig. That is not what the first Omen is, because you have Bill Nighy. Bill Nye. Because you have Bill Nye. I mean, he's huge. He is in this movie and he is much more of a side character. He doesn't do anything super astounding. But the fact that he is there, like, he is a prestige actor. You have Ralph Ineson, who, oh, do you guys remember seeing him in The Witch? He is so fantastic in that movie. He has such a unique look, a unique voice. I understand why he's kind of been stuck just doing period piece horror, but I feel like this man should be in 10 horror movies every single year. I thought it was an inspired choice to make him the new Father Brennan. But of course, the shining star of this film, Nell Tiger-Free. I had never seen her in anything before, so for me, she came out of the gate swinging. I am aware that I had a role on Game of Thrones, no idea how big, I've never had anything to do with that show. She had the perfect look for this film, and this note is gonna sound kind of strange. She has really, really cute but imperfect teeth, and I love seeing that in a period piece. I'm so tired. Like, okay, The Haunting in Venice is the first thing that comes to mind. There's an actress in that film that very obviously has had lip filler, and you just need to stop casting women that have had lip filler in period pieces. Like, I'm sorry, it's enough. We've had enough. I'm so tired of seeing veneers. Nell Tiger-Free's teeth are adorable and they're real, they're hers. They really made it a point with everybody that they cast. They do not look like modern people. The whole aesthetic of the movie is so gorgeous. It's just dripping in a 70s atmosphere, and it's not over the top. It's not like, you know, when they're riding through the streets of Rome, you see all the hippies of the free love movement. You see the hippies as they actually were. Not all like shiny dressed up in disco stuff, but you see them picketing and they're protesting, and that's actually like a major theme of the movie. The fact that hippies are not just, oh, free love, whatever, that they are actually a counterculture movement to oppressive systems. Everything about it just felt so authentic. I think that's the best word for it. Especially because they shot on location in Rome. This was especially effective because most of the architecture in Rome has been there for like hundreds of years, so you can really easily shoot a very authentic period piece there. As with a lot of other European cities, why is horror so American-centric right now? I need more international horror to make its way to American theaters because we're so tired. Blumhouse pretty much dominates the horror market in theaters, and at this point it feels like there's nothing we can do about it. So if we're not going to get more international horror in the theater, then can we at least make more movies like The First Omen that are actually shot on location, where there actually is attention to the entirety of the mise-en-scene? I'm just really sick of the cheapo Blumhouse movies. The First Omen cost only $30 million. In the grand scheme of things, that's a drop in the bucket compared to all these other giant tentpole films. You can shoot on location, you can get all these period accurate cars and wardrobe, and get this dynamite lead actress. I genuinely would love to help them campaign for her Best Actress nomination at the Oscars. I know that it would never happen, but I already know that she has had the best performance of the entire year. I don't care what other Academy Award level movies come out this year, I truly don't. I can tell you right now, she had a better performance than anyone in any of those. We'll definitely get more into that with spoilers because there are some pretty righteous comparisons to Possession from 1981. It actually got under my skin, which if you've been around, you know it's kind of hard to achieve that for me, who is very desensitized to the genre. I feel like I've said that exact same sentence at least 4 times in the last month. Sorry for being annoying about that, but it's because recently I've watched movies like Monkey Man, for example, that have actually gotten my heart pounding. In the case of The First Omen, this movie actually successfully grossed me out, both conceptually and with the body horror. This is a movie where pregnancy is kind of a body horror theme, because she's now been transferred to, it's like an orphanage, but then it's also where they help women deliver babies. I don't know, is it a nunnery? Is that like what it's called? Do they just like do a little bit of everything at those places? And in my experience, I just feel like for the most part, actual birth itself is completely shied away from. And had we had a male director on this film, I don't think that it would have been half as visceral as it was. Because women, you know, most of us, we got vaginas. We're gonna do the down and dirty, and we're gonna show you some shit, and show you some shit they do in this film. Not literally, but the body horror, it really got to me. There are some other more generic horror scenes that I was a little bit bored by. Some very basic creature acting with jump scare, just that kind of thing. It was mostly necessary, and you'll understand that because just conceptually it all tied in. So I'm not gonna complain about that too much. Just as a horror element, that was kind of boring to me. But for the most part, because the character work was so strong, and because the story was so strong and so compelling, I didn't mind that so much. Like, you can get away with doing some more, like, you know, basic horror element stuff that you kind of have to throw in to maintain the pace of the horror. But because everything else is so good, then it's fine. I have a lot of positives for this film, but I did end up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I was kind of teetering between 4 and 4.5, but I did find the pacing to be just a little bit slow. Like I said, yes, some of those kind of tackier horror elements, they were in there to contribute to the pacing and make sure we had a good scare, you know, throughout. But there are 1 or 2 that I personally would have cut out just in the interest of time. It's about a 2-hour long movie, and I was feeling it kind of drag, but I also don't know if that's because I had to pee really bad starting about 45 minutes in. So then I was in trouble, and I was kind of looking at the clock simply because I was like, can I make it? Can I make it? And I did, because I didn't want to leave the theater to go pee. I didn't want to miss any of the movie, and I didn't. So that also probably kind of made it feel longer than it would have. So take that note with a grain of salt. But I also gave Immaculate 4 out of 5 stars, and in hindsight, if I had seen The First Omen first, I don't think that I would have been as forgiving as I was about some things with Immaculate. Immaculate and The First Omen conceptually are so similar. It's very weird, which we'll get into more later, like I said. But The First Omen, listen, there's no need to pit 2 beautiful queens against one another. But I just want to be honest about what was going through my head while I was watching The First Omen. And what was going through my head was, damn, this movie kind of makes Immaculate look not as good as I thought it was. In Immaculate, because the third act was so strong, I was willing to forgive some of the more, like, wooden acting and the really generic horror elements of the first 2 acts, because the third act really blew me away, and so I still gave it 4 stars, because I had a really good time, and I'm also a lot more lenient with my ratings now. I used to have more of like a stick up my butt with my ratings, but now I'm like, whatever, I love movies. The First Omen just kinda did everything better. Like I said though, we'll get into spoilers for both of the movies at the very end in case you haven't seen Immaculate, because we have to talk about the comparisons because they're eerily similar. Another important thing to discuss before we get into spoilers though is how does it stack up to the original The Omen? Like I said, I didn't used to be the biggest fan of the original Omen because when I was first getting into horror, I was watching all of the classics, but when I would watch 70s horror, it just never hit me in the same way as movies that were a little bit more modern. It's weird because, you know, if you've been around, you know that I've loved 50s sci-fi horror since I was a little kid, but 70s movies, something about the pacing of them or something, it just took me a long time to kind of finally get into it. Like, I wasn't in love with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre the first time I watched that either. Same with movies like Black Christmas, but upon my last viewing of Black Christmas, I gave it 5 stars. I think it's a perfect film. So I've really come around to 70s horror, and the same thing happened with The Omen. I still feel like it's a real long movie, and some parts of it aren't super effective for me. I really wish that I could go and see it in a theatrical setting because I think that would help more with my immersion. As is, there are some iconic scenes like the baboons, hello. I love the acting performances. Gregory Peck, one of my favorite men in cinema, but I still felt like some parts kind of dragged a little bit, but it ended up being like a 3.5 star film for me. I really liked it this time around, and I finished the movie about 30 minutes before I got in my car to go see The First Omen. Did that very intentionally, and I do think that The First Omen lived up to it, obviously, because because I gave that 4 stars, so I rated it even higher than the original. Who knows how I'll feel on a rewatch of both of those movies. With The Omen, I just have the feeling that it's a movie I would love more and more with each rewatch, exactly like how it was for me with Black Christmas. Not only did they stay true to the original atmosphere, I think that they leveled it up by taking the location to Rome. Also, I do think that the acting performances are far more iconic in the first Omen. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about when you see the movie. I know that it might sound crazy right now, but just trust me. Also, conceptually, just for me, I found it a lot more interesting because obviously I'm gonna connect a lot more with the main character of the first Omen than Gregory Peck in The Omen. He was kind of a shit husband overall and just kind of a selfish guy. Whereas Margaret is a woman that has almost no agency and she's living in this really oppressive condition. So for me, she's just a lot more fun to root for. And even given the fact that it's a prequel, which makes parts of it somewhat predictable, they still managed to surprise you, I think. I ended up being pretty shocked by the film. Knowing at least part of what the ending entails honestly creates some dramatic irony. It helped me to get even more invested. Because no matter if you know at least part of what's gonna happen, you're still like actively hoping that it doesn't. They still managed to really give you something to root for. To conclude the spoiler-free section, I guess I just want to say that I'm tired of people complaining about not having original stuff in theaters and then not going out and supporting it. Like, I know it's hard to tell who is actually getting out there. I mean, I'm among the people that kind of complains, but I'm going out there and I'm seeing the movies. Why did you guys not go out and see Love Lies Bleeding, huh? Do I have to kill you? Why aren't more people going out in droves to see Monkey Man? I mean, I know that Godzilla x Kong is out, but haven't you guys seen that already? Time to put your money where your mouth is, okay? Oh my god, Arkasha Stevenson, she also is credited on the screenplay. What can't this woman do? Give her $100 million billion, please. We need to support the Arkasha Stevensons of the world, okay? I'll accept no less from Satan's Little Helpers. Go out and see this movie, and I'll be waiting right here for you when you get back, and we can talk spoilers together. The opening of this movie was really strong, and it was kind of what let me know that I was gonna be in for a pretty fun time. Father Brennan approaches this guy, Father Harris, with this photo and this conspiracy, so that sets up the mystery of the movie. And then when Father Harris is leaving, there's some sort of accident, some piping falls down and it carves out the back of his head. That was pretty gnarly, and I was like, okay, so they are gonna give us a more updated model of this story. Yes, we're still getting kind of the same aesthetic, but we're getting it way more gory. Sign me up. That was a pretty gnarly kill, and also I felt like it paid homage to the decapitation in the original Omen. It just felt similar, like the head trauma. I don't know what it was about it, but I loved that. Then we meet Margaret, and like I said, when she is traveling through Rome, she sees all the left-wing protests. This sets up thematically what her character is about to go through. It's interesting how from Margaret's point of view, these protesters are framed as a little bit frightening. There literally is a jump scare when one of them hits the window, which I found to be really effective because she did kind of need to be shaken up. Like, she needed to be shaken out of the brainwashing that she endured while being in this lifestyle. Really like the framing of that and how it was a constant motif throughout the film, because it made sure that you felt this sort of oppressive energy for the entire time. Even when they're not physically in the orphanage, because that is the backdrop, you're being reminded that it is an oppressive atmosphere. Then she meets this girl Luce, and I really liked her at first, and she encourages Margaret to go out to a disco, and I was like, yes girl, oh my god, a cool nun. I've never in a movie seen a nun party before, at least not in this type of a serious setting. I'm sure that there's like a comedy or, you know, some kind of satire that does do that, but in this type of a setting, I thought that that was really interesting, especially in an era before even cameras were a super mobile thing, because of course they didn't have like cell phones back then. And I was thinking about it and just thinking about hypocrisy and accountability and how the church could have gotten away with so much more back then, because how could she have been exposed? How could there have been any accountability there? Nuns could easily be going out and getting it on the weekends, you know what I mean? She was like getting down with this guy Paolo, and I was like, yes, I wish that this was the life for you and not what you're about to go through. But then she blacks out, and that was pretty scary. I thought for a minute that this might go down a different route. I was like, oh, okay, we don't need any more like SA imagery in this film. And it wasn't that. It was oh my god, what happens with Paolo later? We'll get there. Then of course, Margaret also meets this girl Carlita, who is a bit of a problem child because she lashes out. But I love what they did with her character too, and the arc that she goes through with Margaret. How Carlita comes to discover through Margaret Margaret that like, you're not bad, you're just not doing what they're telling you to do. And that is very true to life. My father even went to a Catholic kindergarten and then never again. He went to public school for the rest of his education because when he was in kindergarten, he was like 5 or 6 years old, and he says that he still remembers to this day the fact that the nuns would like whip their hands with rulers and just be like really abusive. The Catholic Church has a long and colored history of beating people into submission. I mean, obviously it's like this tyrannical patriarchy that almost exists to cover up the sexual assault of minors. This movie didn't take it all the way there because that wasn't really what it was about, but it didn't shy away from some of the abuse. Brennan then introduces his theory to Margaret, and at that time I was like, okay, that's a little crazy, but I really liked how high concept it was. The fact that the church itself would try to deliver the Antichrist to get more people to believe in God, honestly, slay. But I don't think that my birth has made people more religious. I think it's had the opposite effect. So then we're back to the motif of the protesters. A riot breaks out when they're on a field trip, and while they're out, she runs into Paolo again. This man gets hit by a truck. She tries to pull him out, but only half of his body comes off of the wall. That was cinema. That was something I truly had not seen before. I mean, you've seen Signs, probably, M. Night Shyamalan. The wife is pinned up against the tree, but that movie's PG-13 and it's pretty family friendly. Like, you don't see any blood and guts or anything. That's the only instance I've seen of somebody pinned by a car that could still talk. Never had I ever seen somebody rip another human being in half after such an accident. Loved that. Ooh, mwah. I'm not touching on everything. I'm just going over the most important parts. Then while Luce is taking her vows and they're doing a bunch of weird stuff that definitely doesn't seem Catholic, Margaret finds all these secret files and she sees pictures of a lot of like the failed experiments and stuff. She takes it to Father Brennan. Well, not before she's like locked away, but then that is resolved really easily by one of the other priests in this place just like taking her out. That is an example of one of the horror elements that I would have just removed. Like, I would have removed that scene entirely. I would have completely removed that male character because he was useless otherwise. Like, he didn't have any dialogue before that. I don't think he had any dialogue after that. And I found that kind of creature acting moment with the jump scare with the creature yelling while she's locked in that room. I don't know, that it felt redundant to me because we've seen a million things like that scene before, and I understand why it was there because they kind of needed a horror scene like between the action and the more dialogue heavy scenes. So like I said, I understand it for the pacing, but I would have said no. I would have just had her escape with the files. We know that there's gonna be a climax, that she's gonna get roped back somehow, you know, to like go save Carlita or something. That's just what I would have done, but whatever. I love this scene because initially when we first met Margaret's character, I was thinking, oh, so she's gonna be the mother of Damien. Interesting. And then we meet the Carlita character and it totally threw me off the scent. Because of what we know, the context that we now have of what the Catholic Church gets up to with children, I was fully on board with the whole thing of like, oh my god, they're gonna impregnate the child Carlita. So then that still made it an effective twist when it actually was Margaret, like I thought in the first place. Very, very well done story, honestly, in my opinion. I know that it's far-fetched. I know that there will be people that don't like it, that are like, really, like this whole church conspiracy, whatever. I mean, like, stuff that's almost that fucked up happens on a regular basis in the Catholic Church. Like, let's think here. Also, the fact that she was one of the experimental babies, I didn't see that coming. And the fact that they have the beast mate with its own spawn. Like, ew. That was a lot. It was a lot to take in, babes. But that's why this movie was so effective, because it really took it there. That's why I liked it so much, because it actually was so daring. Then, of course, as they're trying to escape, Nell Tiger Free gets to have her possession Isabel Adjani moment. That scene, the fact that there are no breaks in it, the fact that for several minutes on end, she was giving this performance. Her whole body went into this performance for this minutes-long scene. I think it absolutely was comparable to Possession. I may dare to say that I preferred the performance of Nell Tiger Free. Once again, there's no need to pit two beautiful queens against each other. I'm just saying which I prefer. Now, with the ending, of course, the climax, very, very fun. But since I've already taken quite a bit of your time, I want to just talk about the actual ending. They made a good ending to service the original Omen, and they also made it their own thing to open it up to the first Omen 2. Or would it be the second Omen, maybe. I don't quite know how I feel about it. The very ending where they're like up in the cabin and Margaret and Carlita are both seemingly mothering the twin of Damien. I don't know if I loved it, because then Ralph Ineson, he comes up and he's like, "They know you're alive." How was that? I can make my voice go pretty deep. And then it ends. I thought a more effective ending would have been, I think it was like a fade to black before that. That felt like studio meddling to me. I felt like they were like, you know what? This is a really good movie. Let's tack on an ending so we can make a sequel. But I don't mind it, because do I want to see more of these characters? Honestly, probably. I don't know how they would go about a sequel. I would worry about it. I feel like it would definitely not be as good as the first Omen, but I would be seated, you know, especially if they brought a similar team of people to make it. I feel a little bit conflicted about kind of like the retconning of the original Omen, that Damien had a twin all this time, but it also doesn't do anything to damage the original Omen. It doesn't do anything to like detract from the story. It's like a retcon, but it's not. You know what I mean? Oh, and lastly, before I sign off and give you my little outro, let's do a brief little spoiler chat with Immaculate. I couldn't believe how similar these movies were and how they both exist so well on their own at the same time. Both of these movies can exist in the theaters at the same time, and it's totally fine. It's basically the exact same concept, except in one, it's very scientifically based, and they're trying to conceive Jesus. And then in the first Omen, it's the exact opposite. It is demonic. There is no science involved, and they're trying to conceive the Antichrist. I think that's so fun, but eerily similar. That's why it's so funny. The top review on Letterboxd of the first Omen is, "This literally happened to my friend Cecilia a few weeks ago." So weird that these came out at the same time. It's so bizarre, but I love it. And I love that they're both good and they can both exist, and they're conceptually, you know, still quite different. But that's it. I've taken a lot of your time, so I'm gonna stop rambling now. Let me know your thoughts about anything down below, but if it's gonna contain a spoiler, then just put a spoiler warning, because there are some fun twists and turns in this movie. We don't want to ruin that for people. If you'd like even more content from me, then of course subscribe, duh. But you can also find my second channel linked down below. That's where I talk about physical media and where I vlog my spooky outings. Like I said, I'm currently in the UK. I'll also be visiting Italy while I'm over here in Amsterdam, so you're gonna get some fun vlogs coming out pretty soon. I also have a Patreon where you have even more bonus reviews, franchise rankings, all that kind of fun stuff. Everything you need is linked down below, including my social media. But more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!